Shalom. This is Rabbi Abraham Fisher returning with Parsha highlights and insights. Glad to be back after not being well. I was sick, but Baruch Hashem, I am much better now and ready to resume. So let's take a quick look at an outline of the parasha and discuss this week's parasha, which is Parashat Bo. Okay, Parashat Bo could be divided into two parts. One, everything leading up to the Exodus, Yetziat Mitzrayim, and then Yetziat Mitzrayim and what follows Yetziat Mitzrayim, what follows the Exodus. So let's take a close look. The parasha begins with the last plagues, the last makot before Yetziat Mitzrayim. What preceded this in Parashat Va'era were 7 of the 10 makot, of the 10 plagues, which means that 3 are left. But as we'll see, there is a bit of overlap between events. Now, one of the many things that can be said about the makot, about the plagues, as they increase in severity from one to the other, is that in every 3 makot, every group of 3, the first one and the second one come with a warning. That is, that Hashem tells Moshe to go to Paro and tell him in advance the plague that is to come. But the third one in the group happens without a warning. If Paro has been warned 2 times, and both times he essentially either ignored or rebelled against the warning, then he's not entitled to a third warning. So based on this, we are now at the point of a plague with a warning, and that's the plague of locusts, arbe, because the first 3 plagues, dam, tzfaldea, kinim, that's a group of 3, blood, frogs, and lice. Then comes the next group of 3, arov, dever, shechin, which is a mixture of dangerous animals, cattle disease, and boils. And then group of 3, which concludes at the end of Parashat Va'era, barad, which is hail. And now this plague, locusts, arbe, is the second in that group of 3. So it begins with a warning. Hashem tells Moshe to warn Paro, to go and tell him what is about to happen. Locusts will come, a kind of swarm of locusts that will cover the sky and will consume everything that grows from the ground, everything that wasn't already destroyed by the previous plagues. And so Moshe and Aharon make their warning, and not even waiting for a response, they turn and leave. However, we find out, this is one of those few examples of behind the scenes that we're given. Paro's advisors and servants say to him, let the Israelites go. After all, we've gone through all of these plagues so far. Can't you tell that Egypt is lost? And so, I'm going to look at this text a little bit more in detail later on. They are brought back. They're brought back to Paro, and Paro asks them, but Paro is not happy with the answer that Moshe and Aharon give, and so he expels them yet again. And true to the prediction, the plague of locusts begins, and it is a plague of locusts, types of grasshoppers, which consumes everything. And even though Egypt has known such plagues in the past, this is the worst one that it ever experienced, and the worst that it would ever experience. And so Paro calls for Moshe once again and begs him to pray on his behalf to remove these terribly destructive locusts. And of course, after Moshe leaves, Moshe prays on his behalf, and Hashem removes the locusts, takes them away, and puts them back where it is common for them to be, deposits them in the Yam Suf, in the Sea of Reeds. There isn't one locust left throughout the land of Egypt. But as Hashem has predicted, Paro hardens his heart again and does not send the children of Israel. And so Hashem brings the next plague, the plague of darkness. Now, this is a plague that comes without warning because it is the third in the group. We had hail, locusts; those came with warning, and darkness comes without warning. So Hashem instructs Moshe to extend his hand towards the heaven, and this will bring darkness. Now, the darkness extends for a long time, 3 days of darkness, followed by 3 days in which it's not even possible for the Egyptians to move. They're completely immobilized for those second set of 3 days. So this is a terrible, terrible plague. The Egyptians cannot see; they can't move. Where the Israelites are, there's light everywhere. Eventually, Paro calls for Moshe and seems to be relenting. He says, "Okay, you may go, but you must leave your animals here." And Moshe says, "No, that's not the way it's going to be. When the time comes, we will take all of our animals. As a matter of fact, when the time comes, you will even give us animals for us to take with us, to sacrifice with us. But we will not leave anything here. We're going to take everything with us. For one thing, we do not know what form of sacrifice Hashem will demand of us. We have to be prepared." So Paro once again is angry, and this time he says, "Do not come back. If I ever see you again, you'll die." And Moshe says, "You have spoken correctly. I will not see you again. This is the last time." What comes apparently in the middle of all of this is Hashem talks to Moshe even before Moshe leaves. And Hashem says, first of all, that when the time comes for Bnei Yisrael to leave, they must ask the Egyptians for gold and silver. Uh, think of it as, I think we can think of it as a form of reparation for the many, many years of servitude. Uh, they've been involved in backbreaking labor for all of this time. It is time for the Israelites who are going to leave fairly soon to be compensated for all of their years of work. And in this way, Hashem will fulfill the promise that he made going back to Abraham when Hashem told Abraham that this whole procedure is going to happen. The children of Israel are going to be slaves. They'll be strangers and then slaves and oppressed. But when they leave, their oppressors will be judged, and they will leave with wealth. So Hashem tells Moshe, the time is about to come for uh, the Egyptians to give these valuables to the Israelites, but they have to ask for them. And Moshe gives the final warning. So this is the 10th plague. In a sense, it's starting all over again with the group of 3, but this is the last of the plagues. And the final warning is that at midnight, the firstborn of every household in Egypt will die. And Hashem tells Moshe once again, be aware, Paro will not let you go. I'm keeping the heart of Paro hard and stubborn so that I will increase my signs. And after this, Moshe and Aharon leave from Paro, and this is essentially the last time that they appear before Paro. We then come to the second part of the parasha, and that is the events that revolve around the actual Exodus, the actual Yetziat Mitzrayim. Notice that we haven't gotten to the actual 10th plague yet. It's been warned because a number of events are going to happen at the same time. The plague of the firstborn, the slaying of the firstborn, will coincide with the first Pesach and the beginning of the Exodus. So these events are about to come together. Leading up to the Exodus, leading up to Yetziat Mitzrayim, Hashem tells Moshe about the commandments of Pesach in Egypt. There's a difference between the way Pesach was observed in Egypt and the way it would be observed in the future. So the beginning here is the commandments of Pesach as it's to be observed in Egypt. And as we continue in the parasha, we see that there are certain ways in which Pesach for all generations is the same as Pesach in Egypt, and in certain respects, it's different. First and foremost, Hashem talks about this month. This is the month in which the Exodus is about to happen. It's the month at the beginning of the spring. It's the month that in later history we would call Nisan. But at this time in history, the months do not have names, they just have numbers. So one of the things that Hashem says is that from this point on, this month is going to be considered the first of the months. Also implicit in this command is that the determination of every month will be based on the new moon, that a new month will begin on the day during which the moon is new. And we find out later on in halacha, that that is that is determined by sighting of the moon by means of witnesses who report and testify before the Supreme Court, before the Beit Din, and that determines the beginning of every month. And this goes back to the time in Egypt. That this is the beginning of the month, and that this month will be considered by you from this point on the first of the months. Probably before this time, the first of the months, the beginning of the year, was the month in which we observe Rosh Hashanah, because that is the month when humanity was created. Adam and Eve were created, so it's kind of a universal beginning. But now we're starting anew, and we're creating a new people, the people of Israel, and they deserve a new beginning. So the month of Nisan, the month that we now call Nisan, is the first of the month, and the month in which we have the holiday of Rosh Hashanah and a number of other holidays. The month that is later called Tishrei turns into the seventh month. Hashem proceeds and tells Moshe about the actual Pesach. And the Pesach here refers primarily to the Pesach sacrifice. The sacrifice itself is male, 1 year old lamb or goat, one per group. It could be for a family or join together several families, such that every member of the family will be able to eat some of the meat. The instruction also says that they are to select this animal starting on the 10th day of the month, and partially it's in order to examine it and make sure that it does not have any physical deformities that would disqualify it. But in certain respects, this saving from the 10th is a special law that only applied in Egypt. The animal is to be slaughtered on the 14th day of the month in the afternoon. That's a law that will be even observed into the future. The blood that's collected is to be placed on the doorposts and the lintel of the place where they live. Now, that's a rule that will not apply in the future. In the future, when Bnei Yisrael will observe this festival every year, blood is collected and part of it is dashed on the altar. But there is no altar, and the blood serves a different purpose, as we will see in Egypt. The animal is to be eaten after it's been roasted in its entirety. That's universal. And eaten with matzot, with unleavened bread, as well as with maror, which is bitter vegetables. And there are different types of vegetables that qualify as maror, and to eat it at night. As we all know, a new day begins at night. So the slaughtering and the preparation takes place in the afternoon of the 14th, but when they'll eat it will be the beginning of the 15th of the month. They're instructed not to leave over anything until the morning. That's a rule that also will apply in the future. And also that they are to eat it in a state that they are ready to travel. They're dressed for the road. They're holding their stick. They're dressed for travel. Now that's something that does not apply to future Pesach. That's only the Pesach in Egypt. And Hashem says that that very same night, while you are eating the Korban Pesach, which is a celebration to Hashem, also shows how Bnei Israel are throwing off the ideas of Egypt, because the Egyptians worshipped animals. That very same night, Hashem says, is when I will slay the firstborn of Egypt, from the king all the way down to the animals. Um, and as I'm going through Egypt to slay the firstborn of every family, I will pass over. That's the meaning of the word Pesach. I will pass over those houses that you have placed blood. You demonstrate your faith in Hashem by doing this, and I will pass over those households. After these instructions, we're also taught about the commandments of Pesach and of Chag Hamatzot for future generations. What do I mean by Pesach and Chag Hamatzot? Pesach, Passover, Chag Hamatzot, the festival of the matzot, of the unleavened bread. Aren't those synonymous? Well, the answer is no. They're not exactly synonymous. Maybe in later usage they became synonymous, but originally Pesach referred specifically to the time that the Passover sacrifice was brought, which was on the afternoon of the 14th, and then consumed that night, at the beginning of the 15th. Chag HaMatzot, the festival of unleavened bread, is a 7-day festival that begins that very same night, the beginning of the 15th, and lasts for 7 days until the 21st day of the month. If you look closely at the way these terms are used throughout the Torah, they are not synonymous, but they do overlap, because Pesach, when the Passover sacrifice is eaten, is that night, which is the beginning of Chag HaMatzot. So that night is the overlap time between these two. At this point, Hashem continues and reminds Bnei Yisrael about the observance of these festivals in the future. In Egypt, there was only a Pesach, and it was done in a specific way, as we've been describing. But there was no Chag Hamatzot, in Egypt. So part of the rules right now is talking about how will Pesach be observed into the future, and how will Chag Hamatzot be observed in the future. So first, Hashem says, remember to keep the Pesach, meaning the Passover sacrifice, how it is to be offered. But there will also be Chag HaMatzot, the festival of unleavened bread, and that will be for 7 days. Among the rules of Chag HaMatzot is that you are not to keep, meaning own, or eat chametz in any form. Chametz is leavened bread. More accurately, it's something that's been made from grain products, and the grain is defined as wheat, barley, rye, oats, and spelt, that has been allowed to leaven, uh, uh, especially if leavening agents have been placed into them. So chametz is not to be owned or eaten anytime during Chag HaMatzot. As a matter of fact, later on we learn that we have to stop eating and owning chametz on the 14th in the afternoon, even before Chag HaMatzot begins. Furthermore, on the subject of these 7 days, the first day and the 7th day are festivals, and that means that there is to be a restriction on work, similar to what we will learn about Shabbat. However, one class or category of work that will be allowed, and this is not the place to elaborate on that, but one type of work that will be permitted is work that involves food, work that involves the preparation of food, such as cooking, for example, and baking is permissible on Pesach, And we learn later on it's actually there. It's also permissible on other festivals. So Moshe teaches Israel about the commandments of Pesach, both as they apply there to apply in Egypt and for future generations, and telling them apart is important. And Moshe says something that he's going to say several times before this parasha is over, and that is that it's important to tell your children about this, uh, because there is going to come a time that children will be born to you who have not gone through the everything that you've gone through. You haven't. They will not have gone through the the persecution in Egypt, the slavery in Egypt, the exodus from Egypt. But it's important to bring them into the awareness of what Bnei Israel went through. So you have to tell them about this. Uh, and then we find out that the children of Israel do as they have been instructed, namely, they bring the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, in Egypt, just as they had been instructed. And at that very same night is when uh, the 10th of the plagues, which is the killing of all of the firstborn of Egypt, takes place. What follows is the Exodus itself, because Paro and all of the Egyptian people release the Israelites without exception. They say, all of you can go, take your animals without any exception whatsoever, just please go. And the Israelites begin to go, because this is the time that they are meant to go. They hurry, they pack up their dough, even though it is unleavened. The Israelites, however, do not forget what they've been instructed, namely to ask the Egyptians for gold, for silver, and garments, and then they begin to leave in the early hours of the morning. The first stage of their journey is to travel from a place in Egypt called Ramesses, and they go to Sukkot, and the Torah tells us about this exodus is that there are approximately more than 600,000 men, um, not to mention others, not to mention children, and also that a mixed multitude goes with them, meaning other people who, as it were, jump on the bandwagon, take this opportunity to leave as well. And the Torah says that Bnei Israel at this point have been uh, in under the persecution for 430 years. Our rabbis teach us that the 430 years does not begin from the time of the descent to Egypt. It actually begins much, much earlier. It begins when Hashem first told uh, Avraham that this was going to happen. So the prediction and the fulfillment are included in the 430 years. As they are leaving, they're taught some more commands. Moshe particularly is taught some about the Korban Pesach. Here are about the Passover sacrifice. Only Israelites are permitted to partake. People have to be circumcised. There's some discussion about a slave, uh, if he's been circumcised, may participate. The Korban Pesach must be eaten in one house. Don't take it from place to place, all in one place. And do not break any of the bones while you are eating this sacrifice. The very last section of this parasha are additional commandments that, in one way or another, have something to do with the Exodus, that help us to commemorate the Exodus. Obviously, the holiday of Pesach itself does that, but there are some other observances that the Torah talks about here. One of them is the firstborn, that the firstborn of Israel, firstborn males in every family, as well as the firstborn of animals, are to be sanctified to Hashem. The firstborn males are redeemed, which the Torah teaches about, and the firstborn of animals are sacrificed. Obviously, or primarily, we're talking about animals that can be sacrificed. They are taught that they have to remember this event even when you come into the land of Israel, even when you come in and you settle, you have the land that has been promised to you. Every year, you have to remember Passover, Pesach, but you also have to remember this when animals, firstborn animals are born to you, or firstborn children are born to you, and all of these events. Of course, the connection to firstborn is that Hashem spared the firstborn of Israel as he was slaying the firstborn of Egypt. Once again, we are reminded of the 7-day festival Chag HaMatzot. Again, tell your children about all of this. And we're also taught about the mitzvah of tefillin. It's mentioned actually twice towards the end of the parasha. The word tefillin is not used, but it's very clear from what the Torah does say that we have a mitzvah of binding the words of Hashem onto our arm and to our head. And the connection to the Exodus is that God took us out of Egypt with a mighty arm, and we are to remember this, take this to heart, take this into our mind. To continue the subject of the firstborn, an interesting special mitzvah is told about the firstborn of donkeys. So it's a non-kosher animal, and yet the firstborn of donkeys also has a certain sanctity. They are to be redeemed with a sheep, or if you don't do that, then you have to decapitate the firstborn of the donkeys. And the Torah concludes by reminding us that when your children ask you about this observance of the firstborn, to connect it to the Exodus. And this is the conclusion of Parashat Bo. So what we do is take a closer look at the incident at the very beginning of the parasha, in which, after Moshe and Aharon warn about the plague of locusts, and they leave, the advisors of the king say to Paro, "Let the Israelites go. Israel is basically won. Egypt is lost." And so, Vayushav et Moshe v'et Aharon el Paro. Moshe and Aharon were brought back to Paro. Vayomer alehem, and Paro said to them, "Lechu ivdu et Hashem Elokechem. Go and serve Hashem your God. I'm giving in. I've changed my mind." And he asks a question: Mi vami haholachim. Who and who are the ones who are going? Tell me exactly who is who you intend to go on this journey to worship Hashem. Vayomer Moshe. Moshe says, it's a very famous kind of a sentence, Bin arenu uvizkenenu nelech. With our young and our old we will go. Bivanenu vivnotenu. With our sons and our daughters. Bitzonenu vivkarenu nelech. With our flock and our herds we will go. Ki chag Hashem lanu. Because we have a festival to Hashem. So he's saying, you ask who's going? The answer is everyone. Paro's response, Vayomer alehem, and Paro said to them, Yehi chen Hashem imachem kasher ashalach etchem ve'et tapechem. God should be with you the same as I will let you and your children go. He's speaking sarcastically. You should live so long that I should let all of you go, including your children. No way. Re'u kich ra'a neged pnechem. see that evil is before your faces. This translation says clearly you are bent on mischief. There's no way I would let all of you go. Lo chen, not so. L'chuna hakvarim v'ivdu et Hashem. Go, let the males go, let the men go to serve God. Kiota atem mevakshim, because that is what you're asking for. In other words, you ask for everybody, but we all know that the only ones that are going to do anything are the males. Uh, so you ask for everybody as a negotiating position, but forget it. I'm not going to let anybody go. And once again, vayigara shotam me'et pnei paro, and they expel them from before Paro. Time and time again, uh, Paro seems to be relenting. But then he changes, and every time they talk about who is going to go, um, and every time Moshe gets clearer and clearer that when the time comes for us to go, we all are going without any exception. And of course, when the time comes and they're expelled by the Egyptians, in fact, all of them leave without exception. I thought it would be uh, instructive for us to take a look at the comment of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch on this verse. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch wrote this in German, and it's been translated into English. Um, he is, I'm sorry, it's been translated into Hebrew. Hirsch has also been translated into English, but here we have it in summarized in Hebrew. And according to Hirsch, Moshe's response is not just a negotiating position. He's stating a fact about Avodat Hashem, how we serve Hashem. He says, Ein lanu bifnei Hashem lo anashim beinayim, lo kohanim, velo nitzigim. In the presence of God, we don't have middle people. We don't even have priests or representatives. He, of course, Hirsch is aware of the fact that there is a role to be played by the Kohanim. But the point is that in the presence of Hashem, when it comes to serving Hashem, we're all the same. We're all necessary. It's not that some people are important and other people are not important. Im aleinu lalechet, harei shekulanu tzrichim lalechet. If we need to go, then all of us need to go. Mitzair ha'olalim hamutal ba'arisato, from the youngest toddler who's still in his crib, ve'ad la'acharon ha'kvasim shebershutenu, and down to the last of the sheep that is in our possession. Service of God is a totality. It's the totality of everyone we are, all the people we are, and indeed everything that we own. The the collective demands this of each and every one of them. Af echad v'shum davar lo yuchal lehishaer. No one and nothing can remain behind. We have to go in our totality. And why is this so? Because, as Moshe said, Sheken Chag Hashem Lanu. There is a festival to Hashem. But he points out that the word Chag, festival, essentially means, as he says, Aleinu litzor chug ma'agal misaviv Lashem. It is upon us to form a chug, and a chug is a circle around Hashem. We have to gather ourselves in a circle, the heasef misaviv, in the same way as a circle requires every single point on the circle without exception. So similarly, our entire people are required in every single one to be part of that circle. If one were to be missing, then the circle wouldn't be a circle because it would not be complete. Kriya zo hi habitui l'ritzono. This call is an expression of His will. Lirotenu chad mimishpachtenu b'kol kinyanenu misvivo. To see all of us, every single one of us, from every member of our family, as well as all of our possessions around Him. This is a very important idea that Hirsch is expressing here, that the entire Jewish people are necessary, without exception, in the collective national service of Hashem. Uh, so we go, we progress in our service of Hashem by being a complete circle, as it were, around Hashem's worship. Well, I thank you very much again for joining me this week on this exploration of Parashat Bo, a parasha that we will discuss quite a bit, especially on the night of Passover. Um, I thank you all for joining me. This has been Rabbi Abraham Fisher for Parasha Highlights and Insights, saying Shalom.